This is the Creative Market Free Goods Roundup for the week of November 2nd, 2015. There are 6 different free goods this week, but they are free this week only. So if you see something you like when you're watching this video, just check out the description of this video where I'll place links to download each one of these 6 different free items. So first up here is Chapman Handwritten font. This font is provided in both OpenType as well as web font formats, and I have it opened up inside Illustrator here to show it. So as you can see here, it includes both lowercase as well as uppercase variations of these letters, and then it has the numbers 0 through 9 as well as quite a few different special characters. So I'm going to go out and zoom in on the lowercase letters here first so you can get a better idea of how these letters look. So these letters have a very hand-drawn look to them. As you can see, they have a lot of kind of rounded areas that are unexpected throughout the different letters that give it a much more hand-drawn, like let's say with a pen sort of look than if they were extremely clean in their appearance. So if you're looking for a very legible but still somewhat hand-drawn looking font, this is a kind of nice one to consider for that purpose. And here are the uppercase variations of the letters. Once again, they have the sort of rounded areas on parts of these letters that are a little bit unexpected to give that slightly imperfect and more hand-drawn appearance. So I'll just keep on going through the rest of the capital letters right here and then down to the numbers, which also have the same characteristics as all of the letters above. All these different numbers and letters and special characters work extremely well together. This font flows pretty nicely, so no matter what element from this font you're using, it's going to look like it's part of a font family, which is certainly a good thing. And as far as the special characters go, I'm just going to highlight this and then go to type and then glyphs near the top here. So you can see that there really is a very large selection of different special characters here to go in and choose from, including a bunch of accented marks for other languages based on Latin that are not English. So if you're using this typeset outside of English, those will be especially useful for you. And down here I typed up Free Goods Roundup so you can see how it looks actually typed up into a sentence. The kerning is kind of a little bit all over the place between some of these letters. It's sort of expected on a hand-drawn looking font. You can make the call to either tighten stuff up as you see fit or leave it the way it is. Since it is a hand-drawn looking font, I don't think irregular spacing really takes all that much away from the different letters, since it just adds to that hand-drawn sort of imperfect look. And the only thing I really had to note with this particular font, I'm just going to duplicate this off to the side here. I actually tightened up the leading of this font quite a bit, and to get to leading you just go to Window and then Type near the bottom and then Character, and leading looks like an A with an A and a line from the baseline to the baseline of each letter. So that is basically what the leading is, the distance between the baseline of these two different lines here. And I have this one set at 82. If I set it to auto, which is what it is by default, you can tell the space is very, very significant. So you might want to highlight your type when you're done and then reduce down this number until you get these looking a little bit closer to how you want them to look, kind of depending on how you're using this. If you're using this as a bunch of paragraphs or ongoing sentences, you'll probably want to make that change. But if you're using this as a headline font, then that change really doesn't matter. But that's it for this font. It's a pretty nice hand-drawn looking font that's also extremely legible. So if you have some projects in mind where you think this might be useful, just be sure to pick this one up this week. Next up is Handlettered Catchwords and Elements. These hand-lettered catchwords are provided in a bunch of different formats, including Illustrator, shown right here, EPS, Photoshop brushes, as well as PNGs. So there's 2 different pages of both the EPS and Illustrator files, so that's what I'm going to be focusing on right here. And I'll just zoom in on these hand-lettered catchwords so you can get a better idea of how these look up close. And I'll actually zoom in really close on this one right here, so it kind of gradiates between the black and then the lighter grays to give this a little bit more of a hand-drawn look to it that's kind of distressed. So that's how it looks inside Illustrator. I'm quickly going to show you the Photoshop brushes right here so you can see the difference between the Illustrator and the Photoshop. So right here is at 100%, so you can see that it looks a little bit more organic than the Illustrator version, since Photoshop's just a little bit better tool at showing complex gradients than Illustrator is. So this one looks a little bit more organic and the edges look softer than the Illustrator version. So if you want these to look as handmade and organic as possible, it's probably worth checking out the Photoshop brushes included. They're very, very large and should suit pretty much anything you want to use them on. So that is certainly an option there. And they do include as well a chalkboard background just like this. And this is, if I go to image size, 3800 and a little bit by almost 2900 pixels high, so plenty big for most print or digital applications. And I went ahead and also just threw this behind these catchwords right here so you can see how these look overlaid on top of that chalkboard pattern. But I'm going to switch back to the Illustrator version here so you can see everything that's included, because this is a really, really diverse set of different hand-drawn catchwords, some of them which have really cool illustrations, like this one that has this skull with an arrow through it. So you could, of course, click this, right-click it, ungroup it, and then just select all the different skull elements right here and kind of drag that off if you want to use perhaps just this skull. So that's another way you can go in and use these as you kind of see fit. But overall, this hand-drawn style is excellent. I think these are all rendered very professionally. So if you're looking to add some really cool handmade character to your typography work, then this pack is a certain recommendation from me, because like I said before, I think these just look excellent in their appearance, and there's a pretty nice and diverse selection of different ones in here to pick from as well. And this right here is the second page, and in case I didn't mention it before, everything you see on these pages is included as a Photoshop brush. There are 96 of those in total, so everything you see here is also included there. On this word no right here, it has these kind of cool wings, so you could certainly ungroup this, kind of just grab this particular wing right here. Whoops, I might have to ungroup this a little bit differently. It looks like these wings are actually pre-grouped, so it's actually very, very easy to go in here and use just those. And you could then pull the word the and put that between these wings, or whatever word you saw fit to do so, or even put an illustration in there. This pack is quite versatile when it comes to stuff like that. And it's also worth noting there are some swirling elements like this one right here that you could use on any type that you see fit. Of course, it'll look really good with these hand-drawn words right here, since they are stylistically very similar. But do keep note of all the different special items like this right here, these little border elements or squiggly lines that just add a little bit of handmade flair that you could certainly use either with or without all these different catchwords. But that's it for this pack. I think this pack is excellently handled. It's extremely professional looking. It looks like a very talented hand letterer made these. So if you thought that all these catchwords looked pretty cool and you think you might have some use for them, be sure to grab it this week. Next up is artistic mockup for presentation. So this is a very straightforward item. It's a photo slash mockup, kind of depending on how you want to use it, and it's in JPEG format. As far as size goes, if I go to image size, it's 5,385 by almost 3,600 pixels high, so plenty big for most print or digital applications. And I think the main way you're going to want to use this is probably by overlaying type on these pages to make it say something custom. So I'm going to show you how to do that pretty easily here, at least as far as masking out your type from this flower laid over on this page right here. Alternatively, you could just put your type on the left page and leave this right page blank, or keep your type from overlapping on this flower. So I typed out Love Walrus right here just so we can have some type to use, and I set the opacity of this type right here to 90% to make it look just a little bit softer than pure black. Of course, I could select a different color for the type too if I wanted to do that. But the way I would go about customizing this, I'm just going to zoom in, is once you type out your words or you bring in your words from Illustrator, you're going to want to set a mask on top of them so we can go ahead and mask out this flower shape. And to do that, there is this tool below the layers under layers palette, so make sure window and then layers right here, sort of near the middle, is opened up so you can see these layers. And the mask button looks like a rectangle with a circle in the middle of it. So select your type layer or your pasted in vector layer from Illustrator, whatever the case may be, and then hit that rectangle with the circle in it that says add layer mask. So now it adds in this layer mask, and you want to make sure that is selected. It's going to look like a white rectangle. So with that selected, we want to make sure our fill color is set to black. You want pure black, so 6 zeros is the hex code. And then hit B to bring up your brushes. And then I'm going to click on my brush right here and make sure my hardness is set to 100%. If you want to feather your edges a little bit more, you can reduce this hardness level. But for this, I'm just going to leave it at 100%. So if I zoom in really close here, basically anything that you paint on top of this mask as black will remove it. So I'm going to very quickly just kind of notch out these, and then I'll fix my mistakes later. These shapes right here will be a little bit more complicated and take you some more time, so I'm actually not going to worry too much about this one in particular, but the same principle will apply. So if you want to go in there and do that, you can certainly spend the time to do that. And I'm going to hit X on my keyboard to switch from black to white, so now my white is selected, and then you can go in here and very carefully just start painting back in where these letters intersect with this flower shape until it gets to be pretty close. You can just hit X to very quickly switch between the white and black on your keyboard to mask this stuff out just that little bit faster. This is a fairly time-consuming process sometimes as far as masking things out goes, so the more time you spend on it, usually the better your results will be. I'm not spending very much time on this since I want to go through this fairly fast for the purpose of this video, but I think the end result should still look at least somewhat decent here. So I'm just going to quickly bring in some of these letters once again and finish up this very, very quick mask right here. And of course, once you zoom out, you might see some things that you want to kind of go in there and clean up that little bit more. That's just part of masking things out by hand. But if I zoom out to this distance, it actually doesn't look all that bad. Oops, I totally forgot to clean up this little section right here where this flower overlaps this particular letter. And at least in the case, since my letter right here has some transparency, I can tell where it's overlapping because the black looks a lot darker in the overlapping sections. So I can then go in and kind of clean those up by hand until we get a pretty decent end result here of this flower overlapping our type. There's an alternative way of doing this that's a little bit more complicated. You can just duplicate the background layer by hitting Control J on a PC or Command J on a Mac. And then I'm going to hit Control U on a PC or Command U on a Mac, set the saturation to 0, and then hit Control L on a PC or Command L on a Mac to bring up the levels here. And what I'm going to do is bring this middle one right here to the right to darken things up, and then bring the far right arrow to the left a little bit to make this a stark white while our flower remains a pretty dark black. So this is a fairly professional way of masking stuff out. And then what I'm going to want to do is click on channels, and then on any one of these channels, I tend to select the RGB since it's the darkest, hit Control and select that, or on a Mac hit Command and select that. And then I'm going to turn back on my type and turn off this new layer we made right here. And I'm actually going to delete this layer mask we made previously by hitting the garbage can icon while that's selected. And then it will ask me, do I want to delete this? Yes, I do. And now with my type selected, I'm going to once again click on the Add a Layer Mask button right here while you can still see all this stuff we made is still selected, and hit that. So that went ahead and masked stuffed out extremely fast. So this is probably the better way of doing it if you're comfortable working with levels and going through those relatively simple steps that I just outlined. There will be areas that you're still going to want to go in there and maybe tighten up a little bit if you want to. Like this is a little bit odd how it handled this since there is a shadow on that flower. But once again, click on that mask, hit B on your keyboard for the brush. Make sure white is selected if you want to erase the mask, and then you can go in there and kind of clean it up just that little bit as you see fit. And also, as you can see, there are some areas where you can kind of see the letters still through the flower, so you can of course just manually go in there and cover that up a little bit better to get the coverage to be a little bit more solid. So this was an extremely quick mask job, but it kind of gives you the idea of what you can do. So this ended up being a lot longer video for this particular item than I thought it would be, but hopefully those little tips are helpful for you when you go in here and use this. So if you like this mock-up image and you think it'll be handy for you, just be sure to pick this pack up this week while it's still free. Next we have Vector Collection of Ink Patterns. This is a collection of 5 different EPS files. Each of the 5 files has 6 different seamlessly repeating patterns, so there's 30 of those in total. And many of them are very abstract and they're all very organic in their appearance, so I'm going to be showing you how these look. And I think this is actually a super impressive pack because of how abstract and organic they do look when you actually repeat them out. So on this particular page, I went ahead and repeated a few of them off to the side here. So this one is of hearts, but as you see it repeated out, it looks very natural. And if you get larger and larger with your repeats, it'll keep on looking that way. So that's kind of a thing to think about with all these patterns that are included in this pack. They do a very nice job of hiding the fact that they are repeats. So if you're trying to cover very large areas with these patterns, they're really going to excel at doing that. And here is the next page. So a lot of very inky, very handmade looking patterns here. I'll zoom in on this one right here, which has an extremely painterly look to it. It's kind of a telltale of a lot of these different repeats that they have a very inky or brushed look in their appearance. And as you can see, this one is extremely abstract in this particular one. So I'm actually going to repeat this one off to the side here very quickly, just so you can see how this one looks as it is repeated. So I'm just going to do a pretty quick job of this just so you can get a good idea of what to expect when you repeat stuff like this. So this is the final result, and as you can tell, it still looks like it's not really a repeat. This is a very natural appearance still, so overall I'm very, very impressed with this particular pack for creating repeats that do a superb job of hiding the fact that they're repeats. And with these different kinds of patterns right here, I think you could do a lot of really interesting stuff with them, from using them on something like, let's say, a shower curtain. I don't know why, but a lot of these patterns remind me of something I might expect to see on a very artistic shower curtain, or even much more complex things like, let's say, tabletops or larger items that you want covered, because I think this overall look just lends itself to kind of exciting uses like that. I could totally see this on a kitchen tabletop it might not be something that'd be easy to pull off if you're just a designer. But if you think about these patterns on a grand scale, because of how well they repeat and how well they hide the fact that they're repeats, I think you're pretty limitless on what you could achieve or create when you're actually making these into repeats. So I'll just do this one very quickly as well, because I think it's kind of fun to repeat these different patterns just because they do have such an interesting look as they repeat and get larger. It's kind of hard to tell when you just see the individual tile, but once you get it brought into a much larger section like this, you can get a better idea of what you can expect with that particular section. So this is the final page right here. Once again, very scribbly, very inky in its appearance. There's some really cool textures going on here if you zoom in a little bit closer on this, so keep note of that as well. And you can of course just select, like, let's say this black color, go to select and then same and then fill color, which will select all of that black on the page, and you can change everything on this particular page to be a different color, like this blue. Well, it actually seems like my color board is set to grayscale right now, so I went to window and then color to bring up my color guide here, and then hit this drop down box. Looks like a down arrow with 3 lines, and I'm going to change that from grayscale to RGB, which then turns this back into the blue that I originally selected. So then I can take, oops, I zoomed in instead of out. I can take this section right here off to the side. I'm just going to repeat this one really quick so you can get a good idea of how this one looks. Like I said earlier, these are a lot of fun to go in and repeat on a larger scale because you get a much better idea of how these actually end up looking. Oops, still a little bit of overlap there. So that is the final result of this one, a very painterly kind of scribble look to it. But like I said before, this is a super impressive pack because of how well they handle the repeats and how well they mask the fact that it is a seamless repeat. Most of these look extremely natural when they're repeated out, so that's really the biggest compliment I can give to a seamless repeat when it comes to its actual use in a design. But that's it for this pack. I think there's a ton of potential in this as far as ways you can use it, from cell phone covers to laptop covers, shower curtains, tables, or even if you just use these as backgrounds for your designs or stuff like that. It's really up to you how you want to use these, but I do think they could be used in a ton of different stuff. So if you think these are as cool and as useful as I do, just be sure to pick this pack up this week while it's still free. Next up is Make It Hand-Drawn Vector Kit. So this pack includes both an Illustrator and EPS file for this page shown right here, and then a bunch of Illustrator files for the different Illustrator brushes that are included. So I don't know if those brushes will work outside of Illustrator, but you're certainly welcome to try. So at least on this main page, it kind of goes through how to make any font look hand-drawn, and it kind of walks you through the steps to go in there and do that. So you're going to want to make sure both your brushes as well as strokes are opened up in your windows. So you want to go to Window, and then you want to go to Stroke kind of near the bottom here, as well as Brushes near the top here. So this is my brush and stroke panel, as you see, and this is all the brushes that are included with the set. So there's quite a few different ones to pick from, and then there's a small handful of different swatches to pick from to apply to your type. So I'm actually just going to go through this step right here to show you how to do it. It's actually very simple. I'm going to hold down Alt or Option on a Mac to just duplicate this letter off to the side here, and it says first you want to choose a brush outline. So with this letter selected, I'm going to go to Brushes, and then I can just go through and select different brushes here. I'm going to make my fill white very quickly so we can see how the actual brush strokes look a little bit better as I'm applying these. So there's a pretty nice selection of different brushes here to pick from, including some that have multiple lines like this one, but I'm going to pick something relatively straightforward here. And next we want to add a fill pattern. So once again, just make sure your letter is selected, go to the swatches panel, and then you can just make sure your fill is selected in the foreground right here on your toolbar, and then you can click through these different fill options to instantly apply that to your letter. And of course, if you were doing this to an entire word or a set of words, this would work just the same. It'd be a little bit quicker to work that way than to work letter by letter. But if you wanted to use this letter by letter, and let's say have one that looks like this and then one next to it that has a little bit of a different fill to make this look a little bit more randomized, you can certainly go in there and do that. You might end up with a pretty cool look if you're willing to kind of make sure that all these are different and then randomized to create a pretty cool look overall. So this pack is a very quick and easy way to make your words or even silhouettes, like simple silhouettes, this will be perfect for, look that much more hand-drawn. So as you can see here, it includes a bunch of different brushes and then these pen marks that you can just kind of drag and use wherever you see fit. So copy and paste them wherever you want to use them. And then there are a ton of different ornaments, all with a hand-drawn look here. I'm just going to close my brushes and swatches window quickly here so it's not covering the screen. screen, but as you can see, there is a ton of stuff here to go in and use. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time going over everything, but there's stuff from skulls right here to a lucky horseshoe and then leaves. So a very wide assortment of different things, all of which look like they were drawn by the same person. So you should be able to mix and match these super easily to make some really cool custom stuff. And then here are the patterns that are included that I went through and added onto my letters. And then there are also a pretty decent selection of frames here to pick from and use. So this pack is extremely complete. So if you're looking to pick up a pack to give your stuff a handmade look that is also extremely versatile in terms of the amount of stuff it gives you, this is a really good one to pick and use. And I'll show you how to even get more use out of this in just a second here. So here I have a window open for the brushes. So I'm just gonna make sure my fill is set to nothing like it is right now. Just click on your fill, then hit this box with a red line going through that says none if you want to remove that. And then you can change your stroke to, let's say I'll just make this one black to make it nice and visible here. And I'm going to hit B on my keyboard to select brush and just draw a brush shape right here. And I actually already have one of their pre-made brush patterns selected here, so it went ahead and applied that. But I want to make sure my brush window is open before doing this, so I'm going to go to window and then once again turn on my brush window right here. Select over this line I drew and just start going down some of the different brush lines right here so you can get a good idea of some of the different options here. So there is a very diverse selection of different handmade looking brush strokes that you can apply. So if you're illustrating stuff and you want to give it a little bit different flair, a little bit different look, then these might come in really handy for you. I'm not going to cover all of them, but some of my favorite ones are at the bottom here because they're pattern brushes. So from stuff like rather fine lines, kind of like this one right here, to stuff like this that's much more organic, almost like little bird feet. I'm not quite sure how to explain that best. And this one is extremely floral in its look. It looks like a vine or something similar to that. And there are also these pattern brushes that make great frames, so picture frames, stuff like that if you want to create completed shapes. So I'll show you how to do that in just a second when I finish going through all of these. So you can also, let's say, go to the rectangle tool, and I'll actually do something different and pick polygon tool just to draw a polygon right here. So with that polygon selected, I'm going to apply one of these frames so you can see how that looks and how easy it is to go in there and make customized frames using these built-in patterns. And then you can of course select this and then go to stroke, which is under window and then stroke near the bottom, and change the overall weight if you want this to look differently. So feel free to go in there and play around with the different stroke weights if you want to customize the look even more. Just don't forget to highlight and select your item before making those changes, otherwise they will not apply. But that's it for this pack. This is an extremely in-depth pack with just a ton of stuff included, so be sure to go in there and check everything out when you download this pack. I think you won't be disappointed with the sheer amount of things that you have. It is worth noting, if I draw a really big shape here and go through some of the different swatches, these can look a little bit, whoops, that actually applied it to my stroke, so I'll just flip this around. A little bit odd sometimes when you apply them to very large shapes. This one looks fine, but on some of these that get a little bit bigger, like this one right here, the end result of a pattern looks extremely patterned, so kind of pick what you're using a little bit carefully to avoid some of those strange looks. This isn't noticeable on something small like a letter, but used really large, let's say in a large silhouette, a little bit more randomized version of the pattern might just end up looking a little bit better, much like this one right here that seems to look a bit more natural. But that's all for this pack. It's an extremely comprehensive set of different things to give your stuff a handmade look, a certain recommendation from me. So if you think this will be useful to you, just be sure to grab it this week. And last we have hand-drawn sunbursts. These hand-drawn starbursts come in a ton of different variations as far as what programs you can use them in. So there's Illustrator files, EPS files, Photoshop brushes, as well as PNGs. And it's also worth noting that they do include instructions about how to load these brushes, for example, into Photoshop. So if you want to check out those instructions for using them inside Photoshop, which I'm not going to show here, you can certainly go ahead and do that. So I'm going to focus on this main page right here that shows all the different starbursts included. There are some different pages, much like this one as an example, called full page. So these are full page starbursts if you're trying to do something like a magazine cover or a book cover or something like that, where you want a really big one that's been cropped out. There are 5 of these in total, but since I think these are the most useful out of the bunch, I'm going to focus on these because you could really crop these however you want and kind of apply them however you want. So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit closer on these so you can get a good idea of what to expect as far as the line quality goes. So if I zoom in really close on these edges, you can see that they have a pretty rough appearance to them that give them an inky or hand-drawn look, which I think they pull off pretty nicely here. And these are all their own elements, so you can pull these off and use these however you see fit. And there is a pretty nice and diverse selection of different starbursts here to pick from and use. And of course, one idea that you could kind of expand upon, depending on how well this works for you, but you can copy one starburst over and then place it on top of another and maybe rotate it a little bit to create some new customized starburst if you want to go in there and do that. This one didn't line up quite perfectly, but you can certainly go in and kind of experiment by doing that throughout multiple different versions of these starbursts to get that little bit more use out of these if that's something you want to go and do. It'll require quite a bit of experimentation, but sometimes that can be really fun to do. And I'll just continue scrolling down. This one right here is one of my favorites of the bunch since it has a pretty cool look to it, and it also has very nice coverage. And this is the bottom bit, so there's some kind of different ones here as well. This one has a triangular shape, which I've actually never seen a starburst pattern have a triangular shape quite like this. So that's actually really cool that they included that one. This one has a little bit more of a subdued or cropped in look, but instead of cropping the edges harshly, they still have nice rounded corners that make this feel much more organic. So that is it for the main pack of different starbursts here. So on this particular page, there are 16 different starbursts. And like I said before, there are 5 different pages just like this one that have a pre-cropped look to them if you want to go in and use those. And they also have the PNGs as well as the Photoshop brushes. So if you prefer working inside Photoshop, that is certainly an option as well. But that's it for this pack. If you thought these looked pretty cool and you think you might have some use for them, just be sure to grab them this week. So that's it for this week's free goods, and do remember they are free this week only. So if you saw something you might have use for, just head on down to the description of this video where you will find a link to download it. And as always, if you found this video helpful, please like and favorite. And if you want to see this video every week, please subscribe. This video is released every Monday to let you know what's free this week on Creative Market. Thank you for watching.